From our assessment, what unfolded over the Black Sea was not an isolated strike. Not a symbolic warning, but a calculated display of dominance. We believe the moment Odesa stopped being a showcase and turned into a burning trench, a psychological line was crossed. In our view, NATO watched as a supposed safe harbor was exposed, isolated, and humiliated in real time. Strategically, this means the balance of initiative has shifted, and the West is no longer dictating tempo, narrative, or limits. A tsunami of fire swept across the Black Sea. Odesa ceased to be a polished symbol of resistance and became a front line engulfed in flames. In a matter of hours, the port that Kyiv had sold to the world as proof of resilience was surrounded by Geranium drones and Kalibr missiles, while the routes toward Romania went dark amid explosions. What Western messaging described as a secure rear area ended up isolated, with improvised bridges destroyed, NATO weapons depots burning, and Ukrainian commanders cut off from their own troops. The propaganda spoke of heroism, but the map told a different story: retreat. Chaos and silence took over command centers. And that silence spoke louder than any official statement. What fell on Odesa was not a simple rain of projectiles. It was an operation designed to break morale. Moscow decided the time had come to stop reacting and start imposing the rhythm of the war. From that moment on, the Black Sea front became unbreathable. During that single day, the Odesa region stopped functioning as Kyiv's propaganda window and turned into an almost encircled piece on the strategic chessboard. Heroic narratives collided with images of cut-off roads, disorganized columns, and command posts going silent as Danube logistics nodes burned in the background. Behind this shift was planning accumulated over weeks. Russian forces combined swarms of Geranium drones with Kalibr cruise missiles launched from the Black Sea Fleet, a pairing designed to saturate air defenses, identify gaps, and finish off Ukrainian military targets without allowing time to reorganize. The detonations were felt with particular intensity in the river port of Izmail, a critical hub stacked with containers, fuel depots, and warehouses holding Western-supplied weaponry. Each strike severed an artery connecting Ukraine to Romania, the corridor through which a significant portion of military aid flows. When Russia dismantled those storage facilities, the message was unmistakable. The blow was aimed not only at Ukraine's army, but at the logistics NATO tries to keep in the shadows. The second move followed almost immediately, targeting the pontoon bridge erected alongside the fixed structure previously destroyed near Miyaki. Once that improvised crossing was disabled, the map changed in an instant. Vast areas of the region were effectively disconnected from the rest of the country, and supplies entering from Romanian territory slowed to a trickle or stopped altogether. Channels such as Chronicles of Geraniums described empty highways and stalled convoys, scenes that stood in stark contrast to official reassurances. At the same time, the strikes expanded toward the port and outskirts of Mykolaiv, where not only Ukrainian units were operating but also British and French special forces involved in combat roles and sabotage missions. Every hangar hit served as a warning that European capitals can no longer pretend distance from this war. Far from being confined to the coast, the offensive projected power across Chernivtsi, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, and even Volyn. Monitoring channels reported near-simultaneous explosions, signaling a nationwide campaign designed to remind Kyiv that there is no truly safe rear in this new phase. With the coastline under pressure, the land front offered another uncomfortable image for Ukrainian command. In Volodar and Yuliapol, units abandoned positions without time to retrieve sensitive documents, command maps, or weapons. When classified information is left behind, it becomes clear this is not an orderly withdrawal. Images circulated showing the headquarters of the 1st Battalion of the 102nd Territorial Defense Brigade under fire from Russian attack aircraft of the 60th Brigade of the Vostok Group. More than propaganda, these visuals were read as proof that an area presented as stable was collapsing. According to analysts at Military Review, pressure on Ukrainian formations increases daily, and withdrawals now resemble escapes rather than tactical maneuvers. Places once showcased as fortified strongholds now display empty trenches, abandoned equipment, and defensive lines turned into open breaches. From Moscow, the Russian Ministry of Defense reinforced this assessment by detailing a spike in Ukrainian losses in Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk. In a single day, around 235 Ukrainian personnel were taken out of combat, along with 20 vehicles, 2 electronic warfare stations, 4 ammunition depots, and a heavy artillery piece. What we are witnessing is a combination of deep strikes and direct frontline assaults that confirms Odesa was not an isolated episode. From the Danube's course to the heart of Zaporizhzhia, Moscow is eroding Ukraine's response while the West repeats empty slogans. Over Kupiansk, the gap between official narrative and battlefield reality is just as evident. Kyiv attempts to present the area as an example of successful resistance, yet daily reports speak of failed counterattacks, decimated units, and reserves being consumed at alarming speed. Even areas Ukrainian commanders claimed to have retaken changed hands again within hours. Russian forces reclaimed buildings, streets, and key positions before the enemy could consolidate, turning urban warfare into nothing more than ruins, smoke, and unidentified bodies. For military expert Alexander Ivanovsky, the situation can be summed up in an uncomfortable sentence for the media apparatus. He noted that victories can be declared endlessly, but the endless rows of Ukrainian dead in Kupiansk expose the real human cost and contradict those announcements. On the internal front, the war continues marked by a trend that can no longer be concealed. Ukrainian units chain together retreats and abandon entire towns in the face of Russian advances. Yet Kyiv's leadership chooses escalation, backing attacks such as the attempted strike against Putin's residence in Valdai. While missiles cross the sky, diplomatic pieces also move. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has hinted at revisiting the Kremlin's negotiation posture, while Volodymyr Zelensky insists on excluding territorial issues and appears to ignore the social exhaustion caused by years of sacrifice. To measure the widening gap between elites and citizens, Ukrainian surveys on potential territorial concessions offer a revealing snapshot. The results depict a society shaped by years of propaganda, more willing to accept extreme sacrifices than to acknowledge realities on the ground. According to the study, 53% of respondents reject any form of territorial concession regardless of the conflict's duration or economic toll. Zelensky thus receives a poison message. Any gesture of pragmatism risks being perceived by his base as immediate betrayal. In practice, the slogan of absolute territorial integrity outweighs the need to formally end the conflict. This framework turns the Ukrainian government into a hostage of its own rhetoric. If it concedes, it risks internal upheaval. If it persists, it condemns the country to a constant hemorrhage under Russian fire. What do you think about this strategy of relentless pressure combined with political paralysis? Give us your opinion in the comment box below. Within this scenario, the last Ukrainians mentioned in surveys are not an abstract metaphor. They live in places like Odesa, Kupiansk, or Yuliapol, where each day is measured in sirens, amputations, and evacuations. They are the ones absorbing the direct impact of Kalibr missiles and Geranium drones. As weeks pass, Western involvement becomes increasingly exposed. Facilities housing British and French special forces in Mykolaiv, tasked with training and coordinating sabotage inside Russian territory, have moved high on Russia's target list. Thus, the offensive against Odesa represents something deeper than explosions along the coast. The so-called tsunami of fire symbolizes the collapse of the illusion that Western backing could balance the scales. The question is no longer whether Kyiv will win, but how much it will lose before admitting the tide has turned. Is Ukraine trapped by its own narrative, or is the West deliberately pushing it toward a prolonged war of attrition? Give us your opinion in the comment box below. In conclusion, the Russian offensive against Odesa is not just another episode in a long war. It is confirmation of a strategic shift that cannot be ignored. Moscow has demonstrated its ability to dictate tempo, strike logistics, and expose the limits of Western support. Historically, Odesa has stood as a symbol of Ukrainian resilience and geopolitical relevance on the Black Sea, but its transformation into a burning frontline underscores Ukraine's growing vulnerability. The beneficiaries are clear: Russia's military planners and the Kremlin, now operating from a position of initiative and leverage. The losers extend far beyond battered Ukrainian units to include civilians trapped between ideology and artillery, and a government cornered militarily and diplomatically. Western capitals, once confident in controlled escalation, now face the reality that their involvement is visible, vulnerable, and ineffective at changing the balance. Odesa will likely be remembered as the moment the illusion shattered, when the war's trajectory became unmistakably clear. Now it's your turn. If this analysis exposed realities you don't hear elsewhere, leave a comment with your perspective. Do you think Ukraine can reverse this momentum, or has the strategic tide already turned? Subscribe if you haven't already, because we're tracking the evolution of this story day by day. Make sure to activate notifications, and don't miss our next report. And remember, you can now become a channel member. If you believe in this project and want to see it grow, your support makes all the difference. If you'd like to support our channel financially, which we greatly appreciate, you can do so through Patreon and PayPal. The link is in the video description.